self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
WESN.
This is a state of emergency. And maybe one of the ironic issues of not having a curfew is we don't really feel that it's a state of emergency. Now, we'll get more on what the police have been doing and some of the successes and maybe some of the not enough successes. Maybe we should frame it that way. But while that is going on, it seems as though too many people are more than willing to kind of not even consider we're in an SOE. And technically speaking, the law could move a lot more quickly, a lot more decisively against you if you do anything that looks like breaking the law. That's one of the ironies of the situation with the police. You don't have to break the law. You just have to do something that reasonably appears as though you're breaking the law, and then they could take action. Hopefully, you're not doing anything that appears to be violent because they might be forced to make a decision. That's the whole issue with the gel blasters that we were talking about yesterday. You don't have to have a real gun. You could have a fake gun and appear as though you are going to attack somebody. Well, to some extent, you can't just wait and see if it's a real bullet that's going to fly, because all it takes is one for someone to lose their life. I think there was an incident where somebody was playing with a gun and it discharged into the floor. One round just happened to hit the toddler in the household. I think this was in North America. That's all it takes. So, outside, of course, of the career criminals who are involved in gang warfare and drug blocks and prostitution and human trafficking, they're not going to necessarily just stop, right? They might restrict their activities, they might hide their activities more, limit themselves, maybe move, change their operations around to try to disguise things or make it not too obvious. But then there are other crimes that are not being done by career criminals, that are just common citizens that seemingly don't seem to understand that we're in a state of emergency. Yes, police still need to have evidence and just cause to do certain things, but the point is they don't have to wait and see and try and go through a whole set of hoops. They could act now. And depending, not everybody is going to be able to sue the state and earn a couple $100,000. Not everybody is going to have a case like that. Sometimes, no matter what technicality you might get off on, you might still be inconvenienced. Of course, decisive arrests could still lead to the charges sticking. Why do I bring that up? Well, we're in a state of emergency, and somebody has decided to desecrate another mosque. And we reach the stage now where they don't necessarily need the same burden of proof to arrest you, to inconvenience you, right? So even if they don't have enough evidence to make the charges stick, you could still be, well, you could still get some uncomfortable time. I'm not condoning beating or torture or anything like that. But, you know, all you need is some witness statements, a cell phone camera, some prior incidents and reports and complaints. They might decide to pick you up and hold you for a few days. And then it might be easier for them to get the evidence, because I think we are somewhat underestimating. Those of us who are not Muslim, it has happened, I believe, with a Hindu temple once. It has happened. But those with the Hindu temple, that was obviously disrespect, even if the intention was to rob. With Christian places of worship, usually it's the intention to steal. And now we have a mosque here being desecrated. Apparently the person is known, he is not Muslim, and he has done similar things like this before. At the end of the day, whether we want to believe in a system of faith or not, religion is a central binding factor that brings communities together, hopefully when done correctly, that helps guide individuals on what to do and what not to do, hopefully when done correctly. Yes, religious bodies are made up of humans, and humans make mistakes, and some of those mistakes are very bad. Some of those mistakes are so bad that at least in other parts of the world, they are criminal. One could argue here there have been potentially some criminal behavior, but that hasn't been decided by the courts. So we can't take justice into our own hands and decide we hate these people, we hate their religion, we hate what we think they stand for, so we're going to interfere with their business. One of the things about religions is they tend to be pillars of the community that help act as a safety net, that brings the community together to help those at the lowest of the low, depending on the community. That's just one reason why we should very much understand the dangers of this sort of mentality spreading. Because religion is a tricky thing. Ironically, the individual in the report has been identified as someone of another faith. Whether you have faith or you're an atheist, the fact of the matter is, religion is tricky in that once you believe something, you can't really believe in anything else. That's not how it works. You can't believe in Hinduism and Christianity. Those things are nowhere close. Maybe you might be somebody that wants to kind of hedge your bets and be spiritual and you want to practice everything. But to some extent, that's kind of weird, right? Maybe you want to lump all Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, all in one. Doesn't always work like that, because to some extent, if you want to be a formal member of any one of those religions, they have their own ceremonies, their own rules, their own requirements. Which one are you going to follow? It's a tricky thing, because for someone like me who does not want to have any conflict with anyone over religion, I don't want to tell someone what you believe in is wrong. But unfortunately, if we believe in different things, it's not that I feel that you're wrong, it's just that I can't believe in what you believe and what I believe at the same time. And that is a hurdle that I don't know if enough people respect and are mature enough to get over. Because then now, for those who can't get over that hurdle, then it becomes not only do I not believe what you believe, but then I actively think you're wrong, and I must tell you, and I must show you you're wrong. I must give examples of how you're wrong. I must punish you for being wrong. And to some extent, that's ironically not the general behavior of Trinidad and Tobago. We tend to be inactive. We tend to like the island life too much. Trini time, laissez-faire, You know, we tolerate a lot. So where, on one hand, of course, in politics, we have racial situations, which this whole situation with the PNM now and having the first, well, essentially, he's not fully Chinese, but he's going to be viewed as Chinese by the population, right? As Prime Minister. And who knows, he may or may not, more on that later, be the political leader of the PNM for the election. That's a whole other kettle of fish to what is on the cards right now that we know for sure. But we have set on talking about, we don't even know if the country is ready for someone like Stuart Young to run for Prime Minister. We don't know. Maybe the country is ready. Maybe it isn't. But then now, religious intolerance to the point where you're going to take proactive action of vandalism and desecration. And this is a state of emergency. Like I said, the last thing you want to do is make yourself look like a threat when the police are having to actively deal with threats and they're wary about other things. You want to de-escalate the situation. Anything you find yourself in, you desecrated people's places of worship, is escalating things. So I don't understand how there's a comfort where someone thinks that they could do that right now. Similarly, more severely, depending on your point of view, I don't, as I've said before, I don't follow every murder story because I psychologically I can't, right? And also, there isn't much value to comment on every murder that happens in the country. What is the point of having 624 examples of, well, the police need to do more, or the public needs to do more, or the government needs to do more, or something more needs to be done? But when they have specific things, of course, I will highlight it. Usually, more often than not, it's when it's children involved, or in this case, the elderly. And what I can't get over, and I have similar thoughts with regards to the prosecutor, but what I can't get over is the fact that we're in a state of emergency, and apparently someone decided to beat an 81-year-old woman to the point where she did not survive the beating. I can't even, obviously an 81-year-old woman is going to be more fragile than a 40-something-year-old adult, male or female. But it's one thing if you're a criminal, you're committing a robbery, you shoot somebody. You might regret the gunshot right after it happens. You might not. You stab somebody, they end up dead. You might regret it right after it happens, you might not. But the point is, those things go quick. You only need to commit to the decision for a few seconds, and then maybe you'll regret it after, but it's over. One stab wound might be enough. One bullet wound might be enough. To beat someone, it wasn't one slap, unless the individual was that frail. Attacked by the suspect who struck her the side of the head with a piece of steel. Maybe it was one hit, yes? Maybe it was. History of mental issues. I understand that things will happen, unfortunately, even with a state of emergency. But I feel as though for a country our size, they happen too often. Mental issues. I mean, now that goes into the whole debate of how much programs we need and the right support and blah, 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 blah. Although I would argue that before we get into more programs to help deal with the mentally ill and stuff like that, basic education, basic knowledge of certain things seems to be lacking in TNT. And then what happens is people with mental issues reach a point of no return, get triggered by something, attack somebody. I mean, I hope it was just one strike. I hope it was just one strike. That would imply that, at the very least, the unfortunate lady only felt so much suffering. But I'm not entirely sure if I could take the newspaper report on the incident as to be 100% true until we get some sort of confirmation. But we're in a state of emergency. And things like this are happening. There was an arson in Tobago. I saw the news on the hour earlier. That was from yesterday, allegedly. And then there's a high-profile murder that happened basically on the second day after the day after the state of emergency was announced. It's almost like if we're not aware of what's going on. How much mental problems are you going to have to just not be aware of what's going on? How much religious intolerance are you going to have to disregard what's going on? And then now when the public sees news like this, it's just one of those things, right? Human behavior will be influenced by the examples they see of what other people are doing. And I hope that more people are not going to see the news and kind of take it for granted. The police not doing anything. Well, the state of emergency was not necessarily to deal with crime in general. It was to deal with the threat of heightened gang violence. And the question is, are they dealing with that threat? Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get more into some of the news coming out on the SOE. That is technically the bigger story when compared to Prime Minister Keith Rowley stating he will resign, because he hasn't resigned yet. So stay tuned. This is Talking About WSN. We'll come back with the daily review after this.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, this is the day when the good lady would be on Talking About, but she can't make it today. However, she should be able to make it from next week. She actually is disappointed she couldn't make the show today because obviously a lot of stuff happened between the last time she was on Talking Point with me and now. Both the state of emergency and the Prime Minister giving us a bit more information and being a bit more definitive in what his future is going to be. Not completely definitive, but it is what it is. So she would have loved to be here to comment on it, but she can't be here. With that said, the show has to go on because there's some things that I want to discuss again. I'm wondering if people are kind of taking it for granted that we have a state of emergency, but it's almost like if we can't feel it, which is a good thing, but I don't know if we should take it for granted, right? And all of a sudden kind of encourage a curfew to come on top of us if we kind of take it too far, maybe. But I'm getting ahead of myself, ironically. Let's kick off today's daily review. So, the state of emergency, the progress so far, or lack thereof, question mark. Now, DCP Junior Benjamin has made some public statements there with regards to a lower murder rate for the current period. The suppression of crime has been somewhat successful in that regard, I guess you could say. And the headline is that he's pleased. You know, some people might say, why are you pleased? Are we pleased? But it also goes on to say more work is needed, right? And here's the thing, and these might seem kind of low-hanging fruit statements that are obvious and cheap and don't really mean much, but it's kind of underestimated how these seemingly obvious statements, they mean a lot when they don't say it. When they do say it, it doesn't seem like it means a lot, but when they don't say it, then the absence is glaring. Because the report goes on to say, well, the quote is, we are pleased with the success, but we are still not comfortable because we are saying that every murder is one too many. So even with the relatively small number of homicides, we are still working to intensify our activities and focusing on areas to reduce the murders. That kind of messaging is technically different to what we get sometimes from the leadership in national security, where it seems as though they're kind of tolerating a certain level of violence, and when it reaches past a certain point, all of a sudden, oh, we have a problem. And it's like, well, what about the murders last week? Why are you complaining about the murders this week as though they're the first murders that you've had to come across in the last 6 months? Now, one of the things with regards to the SOE, I was hoping that they would be going after guns. And I'm kind of disappointed, not disappointed. I'm in the middle, right? I'm not really disappointed, but I'm not really saying, oh my gosh, they're doing it. They have achieved significant gains on getting illegal guns off the streets. But from the TTPS website, and this was in at least one Newsday article, as of Saturday, 17 guns were seized. So we have a couple of photos there. Now, one of the things that concerns me, and there were photos on the TTPS Facebook page of other guns being confiscated. If you look at the images, a lot of those are just handguns. And to some extent, that's not, ironically, what we're concerned about anymore with regards to the highest level of concern. You're still concerned about illegal handguns, right? But with regards to the highest levels of concern, it looks like they have 2 carbines there that's using rifle caliber ammunition, possibly fully automatic. Whether it is or it isn't, the penetrating power of those kind of rounds there in the bottom left corner of the image, those will go through car doors. Those might go through certain, obviously it'll go through glass, it might go through certain structures, plywood or the like. Doesn't necessarily have to be accurate or stay straight, it just has to penetrate and then, you know, ricochet into whatever unfortunate soul may or may not be behind. How many of these are they collecting? There looks like an AR-15 type carbine or rifle. We need more of these guns to be picked up. And then the implication from last year is there are even more powerful weapons that we know have reached our shores, at least in limited numbers. We don't know if they are actually limited in number. because the police confiscated a couple of long rifles with, if my memory serves correct, more powerful ammunition than what was taken in here. So the potential of that escalation is still there. That's why 17 guns also is not a lot. There was a time when we maybe got 2 to 3 gun hauls in a year. I think that first year of talking about, they might have been, Gary Griffin might have gotten 2. The officers under Gary Griffin might have gotten 2, depending on how you want to frame it. The point is, 17 guns, that's what we used to get on a semi-regular basis without a state of emergency. So I appreciate the fact that they are getting guns off the streets, but is it enough by the government's own intelligence estimations that they said this is but a drop in the bucket? The estimate is thousands of guns. This is less than 20. Well, with the guns that were taken throughout the week, it might be over 20 now. But we're talking dozens instead of hundreds or thousands, depending on the estimates, right? Now, of course, there were weed seizures as well, and there was also a report that a vehicle theft ring was dismantled by police in Princestown, which is a big deal because that's a major operation. That's not just one guy doing whatever. Now, it might not be on the level of a major drug operation, but to some extent, it might be bigger than some street gangs with regards to a vehicle theft ring, maybe a chop shop, etc., etc. They have 8 people arrested. The question is, can more be had with these arrests, or will it just kind of end there? That seems to be one of the unfortunate things. The commissioner, I believe, she said she wants to go after the big boys, but we don't actually, when is the last time we have heard of any sort of crime boss be arrested, much less successfully charged? Now, I don't know if the state of emergency really is going to help with that. That's why I'm still hoping with regards to the firearms, because the state of emergency doesn't suspend the trial process. Yeah, you could be arrested, you could be charged. The burden of proof for the arrest might not be the same. You might not need a warrant to go in to search for evidence, etc., etc. But you still have to go through court, right? And it's still going to take, Lord only knows how long. So it's a mixed bag. But I hate to say this because it sounds like the irony is I don't want to pile on the police service. ASP Arun, he acknowledged the fact that they lost the element of surprise, but the way how the government, I guess the police don't want to say it, but the way how the state of emergency was implemented, I don't think you could reasonably make the case that the police ever had the element of surprise. Now, maybe there were some special units that were ready to go, but given how the regulations were published, the delay on that after the announcement was made, whose idea was that? Now, the problem is, given the internal political situation, some people are going to wonder to what extent are these two things, one influenced the other, one interfered with the other. The Prime Minister's brother just died. I think that's a reasonable excuse for him to be tied up over that Sunday, that Monday, when the state of emergency was announced. But you didn't need to announce it on the Monday. You could have waited. You could have waited for the regulations to be properly drafted. You could have waited for the National Security Services to have plans ready, brief certain officers. What prevented that from happening? Was it an implementation issue from the government, from the cabinet? Was it concerns about security leaks? Because, let's face it, we all believe there's corruption to some degree or the other throughout national security. So granted, depending on who you tell about the state of emergency, it could have been leaked out. And if you want to have people at the ready to go on the jump, you have to brief them before the jump. So this is a mixed bag. The police are working hard. Is it getting us the results that we should be getting? one could argue this level of results we've seen before outside of a state of emergency. We've gotten similar results like this without a state of emergency. So then now, part of the question will be, and this is why I've said it before and I'll say it again, particularly with national security things, there's a joint select committee. The irony is, while we appreciate the things that are published publicly, the members of the joint select committee or some other body that is made up of government, opposition, and independent members of parliament should have oversight on things like what was the intelligence to cause the government to call for a state of emergency when their position was to not do so throughout record-breaking murder rates. Because a lot of people didn't get it. It's not like we went from 605 to 805, 624. It is what it is. We didn't need it then. Why do we need it now? They say that there was specific intelligence. I understand it couldn't be revealed to the public. I understand that it's not as though the working relationship between the PNM and the UNC is great or even good or even possible. But let's not make assumptions. Let's not judge a situation before we give it an attempt. And more importantly, regardless of the working relationship between the political parties or not, I do think that something like this, as a matter of principle, should be in place. Now, if the UNC wanted to play politics with that access, that's a whole different story. But let's not assume they'll do that. I want somebody else other than the government to tell me, hey, we've seen the intelligence. It was reasonable. Because we can't know what it is. Because right now, and maybe this will turn around, but given the momentum, given the trend of what's been happening with the state of emergency, we kind of not really see the point. The silver lining, of course, is there's no curfew, there's no restriction to movement. So again, I feel a lot of the population, they're not really considering themselves to be under state of emergency. But one of the reasons why, and I mentioned at the top, it seems like people are they're still willing to commit crimes. I mean, there's an example that I don't want to spell out. But let's just say national security leaks during a state of emergency. I don't know if that's the most responsible thing or if that's the wisest thing. I won't go any further than that. I'll just say that. But let's not forget, and let's move on to the second topic. We have a situation where a prosecutor was gunned down. First of all, that statement alone, think about it, right? Think about it. Now, of course, there was the high-profile situation with Dana Sital. And that is what it is. That situation has not necessarily been resolved yet. But the last thing we want to hear is other members of the criminal justice system, prosecutors, and I don't want to list the potential things because that might be considered encouraging. I might consider it encouraging. But the point is, this is bad enough, but it happened. The government announced a state of emergency, and then someone said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to kill a prosecutor. The fact that the criminals seemingly have no regard for doing something so blatant, and I've said it before, my concern is escalation. So on one hand, all it takes is some fool to think, you know what would be better than an AK-47 or an AR-15, a 50 cal, and we'll just shoot him in his car. Or we'll shoot him through his front door. We'll shoot up his house. Or some ridiculousness like that. We'll shoot him in traffic. We'll just take this high-powered weapon and they're not going to have regard for what's behind the target, where the rounds that don't hit where they go. And even at some point when the gun is big enough, it really doesn't matter if it hits or not. It's going to go right through and damage other people or property behind. But then there's also the fact that escalation could mean going after people who the criminals in the past would not have dared gone after. And the chink in that armor in recent times was the attack last year on the Deputy Commissioner of Prisons. And thankfully, we didn't see any other incidents like that. Maybe because somehow they were able to respond too sweet. But one of the implications of that whole situation is, well, they didn't take the situation to trial because the suspect that they got mysteriously died from polytrauma in the custody of the prison service. That whole situation has also not been resolved. To be fair to those who want strong messages sent to the criminals, I'm pretty sure it sent a strong message. But now, literally, they don't even wait a day. The regulations come out the night, and then the following day, they decide, let's take this guy out. A prosecutor. So, of course, there are security concerns. Chancellor Shmidiyal has called for more protection for prosecutors and the like. Minister in the Ministry of National Security, Keith Scotland, he has confirmed that he has had discussions with the DPP over safety concerns. So, all right, at least on the surface, sorry, with the Chief Justice, not the DPP. Discussions with the DPP will take place next. So at least on the surface, they are taking it seriously. I say on the surface because then we have to see what actually is done to know how to judge the situation in its finality. But this puts, and I believe somebody in the news, one of the daily papers pointed this out, this puts the whole situation with the Park Street situation into perspective. When the DPP was like, I don't like that building, it's not safe enough. Sometimes you need to anticipate risks and nip it in the bud. You don't wait for it to happen and then try and deal with the aftermath. You don't wait to get the virus and then try and survive it. COVID taught us that, right? Crime is a public health emergency, not so? So, I hope people who didn't understand where he was coming from understand now the possibility, the risk to prosecutors and to people working in the DPP's office. It was not far-fetched. It was not some pie-in-the-sky thing. TNT is not a place where that can't happen here. Well, technically, it already happened long before. We just assumed that that was a specific case. You know, I think in our minds we're hoping it's an exception to the rule with regards to Ms. Sital. But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. Now the cops are going to put extra resources into that murder investigation. Now, I really don't know how much more extra resources they have. By all accounts, the Homicide Bureau is doing everything they can for most murders anyway. So we have to wait and see. It's one of those catch-22 things, right? Friedeli pointed it out to me. Why should some cases get special treatment over others? If the law is broken, shouldn't they all be treated the same? If it's a criminal prosecution, should they all be treated the same? Given the same level of gravitas, because the law is the law, crime is crime, murder is murder. To some extent, to the other victims, or the families of the other victims, why is he special? Now, granted, people would think, yeah, because he's a prosecutor, we have to send a message, blah, 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 blah. But to some extent, it is kind of, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth when you have to say, oh, well, it's a prosecutor, so we have to put more resources into it. Every murder should technically have enough resources. The question is, do they? Stick a pin in that. Let's take a break. When we come back, We'll get to that question. Stay tuned to Talking About It WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today. Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist, and we are committed to making good private health care affordable.
For all your medical needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services, contact us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. And just before we move on from the murder of the prosecutor, of course, there are some people who allege that he was murdered because he was a prosecutor. There are some people who allege that he was murdered for other reasons. There's a news report that says it was because he was a prosecutor and not for those other reasons. But that's one of those things that I hope and wish that an investigation will determine the truth of that matter. I think that is pertinent and relevant for us. But what is even to some extent more pertinent for one individual on this matter, a local artist, Lou Lyons, one of the founders of Freetown Collective, who I believe has been on this network on at least one of our shows. Apparently he has had lawyers representing him send to the Seventh-day Adventist Church a pre-action protocol letter because essentially he feels that he has been slandered, he has been disparaged, he has suffered reputational damage, and business dealings as an artist are in jeopardy because an image of him was circulated, I believe, through social media with a caption that alleges, according to whoever wrote this, they alleged, not me, they alleged that he was not known to the congregation, was seen texting and speaking on his cell phone, and was seen walking in the direction of the deceased prosecutor when he was shot and killed outside of the church. Now, there's two issues to that. One is mine. If I am involved in a crime, why am I going to walk towards this area where the crime is going to be committed before it happens? Like psychologically, unless I'm like some master tactician playing 4D chess, why would I do that? That doesn't make any sense. If I am involved in an attempted murder, but I'm not actually playing a part in it, why am I going to walk to the scene to be there? Psychologically, as a human, who would do that? That doesn't make sense. But all right, say you want to argue that point. The caption claimed that he was not known to the congregation, except he's a long-standing member of the church. And in fact, I believe a pastor of the church had issued him already, I believe, a private apology. What Mr. Lyons is asking for is a public apology because something was circulated in social media. And it has had a potential impact on his economic situation, his financial situation, and that of his colleagues that he works with. Because Freetown Collective is not a one-man operation, it's a collective. So the thing is, Mr. Lyons believed that the image came from the church, or at least that's what's reported. Right? And corporate sponsors, when you have an accusation of being involved in a murder, they're going to start to kind of get skittish. And ironically, given the current environment in the international news, extraordinary things around artists in the last couple of months have been coming out publicly. The last thing they want to do is to be part of that negative wave of sentiment indirectly. So, Mr. Lyons, I hope this gets cleared up, because that's the thing. At the very least, we know that part of the caption is wrong. He is not just some random dude. He is locally, to some extent, famous. He's just going to go and be a scout for a hit. So the question is, ironically, the people who put this information out there apparently had no idea who he was. They didn't realize that he was someone that would be known to the public and known to at least some of the members of the very church that they're saying he is a stranger to. And what they think as suspicious behavior, I would say, well, it's not something I think that a criminal would do, but maybe I'm wrong. So the thing is, the best thing I could say about this is I hope it gets resolved cleanly so that Mr. Lyons is not unduly affected and his colleagues and his family is not unduly affected. But that's the problem with things like this. You can't unring the bell and it gets very messy, and at times it can be difficult, even with retractions and public apologies, to undo the damage. So that's why these kind of things are so important. With that said, I'd just like to tack on, there was this story about Facebook and Instagram kind of changing their policies on what they censor and how they censor, and they're not going to censor, they're going to have community guidelines and probably going to put warnings on whatever that Twitter does, right? All of that said, I'm not necessarily going to be for internet censorship. Oh, this shouldn't have been posted. It should have been posted, but the responsibility is the poster. So one of the things that I think the public should get to know is who posted it. It's not about the church having to take blame. They should issue an apology publicly so that it gets out there, hopefully, to counteract the public narrative that the initial image and caption started. But to some extent, now if the Seventh-day Adventist Church was somehow as a body directly responsible, which I doubt, well then fine, it needs to suffer consequences. But I believe this is a case where individuals made this decision, and then at the very least we need to clarify who, what, why, because that also will help exonerate Mr. Lyons. This is of course assuming, I don't think it's an unreasonable assumption now, that he was not involved. How did this even happen? And things like this, what if he wasn't someone who was known to the public, where it would be just the nature of his position will make his involvement extremely unlikely? What if it was just an average citizen that this was done to? And then, we've seen before, at times people want to take the law into their own hands. What could have happened to that average Joe? if someone decided to rush to judgment. I know how to do the police's job better than the police. That's kind of what this is, right? Now, if they had reasonable suspicion, what they should have done was not circulate things online with captions that may or may not be true, that very much seems to be untrue. But they should have just reported it to the police, regardless of what we think of them. That's their job. But to take something like this to the court of public opinion, it's not a good move. Now, maybe we'll wrap up the daily review here today with, like I said, resources. Do we have an issue with resources over this state of emergency, as I mentioned earlier? Well, according to multiple stakeholders, we just might. First, the commissioner herself is saying that cops are spread too thin and blames bureaucracy in recruiting for the shortfall. Now, I've had this concern since COVID. And of course, something happens and you see the police will sort it out. Road safety, police will sort it out. School violence, the police will sort it out. Bomb threats, the police will sort it out. Gosh, I can't remember. Violence reaches the hospitals, so more police needs to be at the hospitals, even though I believe that police provide security for hospitals, right? Now, the head of the Police Social Welfare Association, he has basically come out to say that, look, the service is short by over 1,000 officers, I believe it is. Let me get the figures for you. The sanctioned strength of over 7,800 officers is short by 1,400. This is Gideon Dixon. Sorry, Director, Gideon Dixon. He's the head of the Police Social Welfare Association. And the thing is, when you have shortfalls and a demand on production, you run the risk of overworking the employees you do have in any organization, and then due to burnout or due to, well, I don't want to be burnt out, I'll find something better, I'll find somewhere else to go, they'll start to leave. They don't want to do it anymore. Like it's, yes, police officers is a calling, it's not just a job, it's a vocation. But police officers, to some extent, they literally cannot work 20-hour days, 16-hour days. They need to have some time to recharge, to get their mind right. Spending time with their family is not just so that dad could be present, husbands and wives could be present, mothers could be present. It's also that they can disconnect from all of the really horrible things that they have to deal with on a daily basis or semi-daily basis, go home, reconnect with people who love them, recharge their emotional batteries so that they will have enough in the tank to either give of themselves the next day or to tolerate Lord only knows what. Because not always is it the police antagonizing the public. Sometimes it's the public antagonizing the police, which you shouldn't do no matter how justified you feel you are. You shouldn't escalate with police regardless of what country you're in. And the thing is, the question now comes up with the 1,000 additional officers, right? Gideon Dixon is saying that it never, what happened to it? It did not come to pass. Now, the commissioner has gone on to make a statement on this. Although we were supposed to recruit 1,000 officers in 2024, that was stymied because of the processes. We have applicants who would have failed the polygraph, failed the psychometric test. We have to ensure that when we recruit the best. So until we are able to recruit, we will have a shortage. This is one of those kind of weird things where some people have the assumption that the recruits of the police are nowhere near the best. Meanwhile, the commissioner is saying, well, look, we are trying to recruit the best. That's why we can't get enough people to fill the slots. Where's the disconnect now in our society where apparently with requirements so stringent that we are actively weeding out people? And make no mistake, there are jurisdictions in North America, I can't say with any degree of authority outside of that. But in America, there are jurisdictions where I believe the standards, to some extent, may have been lowered. Because the applicants that they're getting after defund the police, and when the good cops didn't want to have to deal with all of that backlash for no reason, because they weren't responsible for what caused the backlash from the public to begin with. The only people, in some cases, that wanted to be police officers after that were the ones that they didn't do it for the vocation. Well, some stayed for the vocation. Others stayed because there are going to be police officers who wear the badge because of the power it gives them, not because they believe in the job of what they're doing to protect and serve. I know in the military, the American military, they've had to lower standards. Physical requirements in particular. They haven't necessarily gone into a full-scale modern war to see what the outcome of that would or would not be. But that's the thing with the police. They can't make up the numbers. They're down authorized strength. But then we already probably have the perception, because at one point I had that perception. And I had to, as I learned more, I had to kind of move my opinion, rethink my assumptions. Now, I don't know for sure, but my position has changed, right? But I would expect that a lot of the population look at the average police officer and say, wait, boy, we're not recruiting the best. This is one of those things where I'm not saying we need to overhaul, like we go from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Department. We rebrand and we give everybody severance and we hire everybody back in a new organization like Biwi to Carl. I'm not saying we have to do that. It's not that level of restructuring, but rethinking, reevaluating, updating processes, regulations, systems. A lot of that probably needs to be done throughout the public sector. And I don't know if to some extent there's a combination of resistance, because when change happens, those who are comfortable become uncomfortable in various ways. But then also, ironically, do they even have the manpower to do that? Because this is not some small task. Then, it's not just the police. The prison service is also saying, so the head of the Prison Officers Association, Gerard Gordon, he's saying that this whole situation has contributed to the further decline of the prison service because they themselves are lacking resources and support. Under-resourced prisons overburdened prisons with infrastructural deficiencies, and to some extent, if you just add more people into this system, you're not necessarily going to get good results. And this goes back to the fact that our crime situation has reached the point where our criminal justice system cannot deal with the scope of it. And the scope is increasing exponentially, and we could maybe make some minor additions to the criminal justice system additively. I don't know if that's a way, but I'm using it. You know, we can't multiply our prisons by 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. We could add a prison here. We could add a police station there. We can't multiply our judges by 2 or 3 in one shot. We could add judges. We could add it to the criminal justice system. But the crime level seemingly is multiplied by factors we don't fully understand. And it's outpacing. And then there will be a limit. We don't have infinite resources. There will be a practical limit. And even if we had infinite resources, there'll be a practical limit, like what the police apparently is suffering through now, and what other arms of national security might go through or might already be going through, and what the judiciary is probably going through and the office of the DPP. Even if we have unlimited resources, unless we're going to ridiculously overpay for people to encourage people to migrate down here en masse to take up these jobs, we're just going to run out of candidates locally. Our country is only so big. There are only so many people who will sign up to be police, who will sign up to be judges and lawyers and prosecutors and the like, who will sign up to be clerks in the judiciary. Yes, of course, people want jobs, but not everybody wants to do certain jobs. It is what it is. We have 1.5 million people. There are only so many people who will look to apply for those jobs. And then, depending, because of the importance of these jobs, some of them will be screened out. That's the whole problem the police are going through. So as much as we might want to look at each situation in a silo, I would argue that all of these things are symptoms of a bigger problem. Some of it is societal. Some of it is with the government. And what we need would be better leadership. And this is not to blame the politicians, or at least not just to blame the politicians. Because the societal bedrock of these issues, it's not all on them. Yes, someone in the office of the Prime Minister could be a leader for the country to kind of help guide us in the right direction or encourage us in the right direction. But to some extent, the politicians give us what we tell them we want. How we respond to them, that's what they give us back. Will we listen? We barely listened over COVID. It didn't help that some politicians also allegedly broke COVID public health regulations. But we barely listened for that. People are worthless, not just Trinbagonians, but around the world. But now I think we need to kind of understand, it's no longer just cute to say, oh, well, we are worthless people, kya, 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 kya. Sometimes it might seem like a minor thing to kind of skate some of the rules and, oh, well, it's almost like if we still think we're teenagers, we're cool, we're hip to it, we're rad. We could skate the rules because we's big people, we's adults. We's big men and women. We don't have to follow the rules all the time. We could exercise our own judgment, yeah, but we skate things on the edge and far too often cross the line even when we don't realize it. And it encourages a certain culture that's maybe a little too laissez-faire, a little too loose, and we get where we get. Because we had gates. We should have a highly educated population. And then to what extent do we have these issues with psychometric and psychological testing for police officers and polygraph testing issues? These kind of things are not just going to be solved by the police alone with regards to their recruitment, because they recruit from us. The politicians come from us. The criminals come from us. Yes, we might get some gangsters from Venezuela, but that's not going to be the core number of our criminal issue. Let's be real. Our problems ultimately stem from us. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we open the phone line. Stay tuned.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
I'll be back here and talk about the WSND Content Capital. Now is the time we open the phone lines. We want to hear from you, the viewer. You could call in and have your say. Just please remember, if you are live on air over the phone, have the conversation over the phone. Don't look at the TV to try to talk to me with the TV. There's a delay. It will be confusing, and you will be holding up shop. We have to try to keep things tight in case we have callers waiting. First caller for the morning, Diego Martin. Good morning, caller. You're on air.
Good morning, Mr. Paul, and a prosperous and blessed 2025 to you, all your viewers, all your member of staff, Takesha, and everybody. A couple of issues, the SOE. What I'm hearing, based on all the little conversations and utterances and press conferences, gangs, reprisal, and guns. Those are the three things that I believe triggered the Prime Minister to call a SOE. Now, I am still trying to understand what the police will tell us with respect to a successful SOE. What's their deliverables? And I'm going to identify two specific areas over the last couple of years that has been in the public domain: gangs and illegal firearms. 2 years ago, on one of the newspapers, there was an article by the SSA and the intelligence of the country that was saying there was 12,000 illegal firearms. One data point. 2-3 years ago, the former Attorney General said that he has reduced from 2018 to 2020, he has reduced the gang membership and the amount of gangs by about 50-57%. And his last utterances is that there was about 100 or odd gangs and 1,000 and a couple members. To me, a successful SOE based on metrics would be a 70% of that number. It might be difficult, but that is meritocracy. That will tell me that you planned and you executed this SOE properly. Now, I've been seeing a daily grocery list from the police with a number of issues. One of the latest was 21 guns, so many arrests, so many roadblocks. The roadblocks tells me it is another strategy employed from the day of policing. So that is a non-issue. If the police cannot get a number of guns, a significant amount of guns within the first 2 weeks of the SOE, will tell me that the intelligence is questionable. Because if you are having intelligence and if you know there are 12, over the last couple of years, you would have known, hey, this is the time to pounce, this is the time to go with it. The last two times they got significant amounts of cashes. I think a senior superintendent, Alexander, went on some hill in some way and he got a lot. He didn't have the intelligence to say where it came from and who gave him the intelligence. So 21 guns won't cut it. And the other issue I want to talk about is the recruitment of the police service. I mean to say, a lot of people lining up and they failing them because of polygraph testing. That is only one issue. But if we look currently at a particular court case, I'm not going to call any names, where it is said that, I think this is for first officers or something like that, out of 100 applications, only about 12% get over 50%. So what that tells you in the examination, that tells me the people currently in the police service has some competency with respect to numeracy, with respect to language and comprehension. And the court case was brought because you still allow them to be promoted. So if I extrapolate that to the current hierarchy, what else tells us? So the manpower audit report gave you some ideas about 80-something recommendation. I don't know where they are. That is 6 years ago. And it identified that, hey, bringing caliber people to head this certain division, bringing them with requisite tertiary education level, so it will be more brains than bronze, and you could do multitasking and things like that. I mean to say it's a whole comprehensive. I don't know if Gary attempted to do that, but the fact that the police service on the verge of collapsing tells me there's a lot of work to do. Enjoy yourself and have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. Well, one of the things that I was told is that there are more, this is not how it was said, but essentially there are more police officers with degrees than we know of, right? There are many highly educated police officers. The question is, to what extent is that displayed in the recruits and how many recruits? Like, because again, the minority might be heavily qualified or heavily educated. They might have a first degree, maybe even a master's or what have you, right? And it could be that which each recruiting cycle, it's a minority of people that are in that boat. So a lot of people are, well, essentially right. In a country that's supposed at one point had free tertiary education for all, doesn't feel as though we're very educated, right? How does that happen? How does that happen where we had free tertiary education and yet we cannot really tangibly see any sort of benefits with regards to the education level of our workforce and the skills? So it's not just having a certificate. It has to translate to competency and effectiveness in doing the job. And we don't see it, right? It doesn't mean that it's not there totally, but we're not really seeing it. We're not really feeling it. And unfortunately, with the police, the stakes of the job, it makes it more apparent. It makes it more, well, it exposes the deficiencies easier. With regards to the SOE itself, I think really the metrics to judge the SOE as successful is really what's the intelligence that triggered the SOE. And what was the effects that the SOE had on that situation. That's the objective one, right, that we may never know. The other thing is, I'll agree with this, the problem with the arrests of the gangsters, I don't want to repeat of 2011, which can happen depending on if you try to tell the police, hey, you have this target. Well, they'll kind of try to push for the target. That's human nature. And it won't always be in the right way, right? However, I'll agree with you with the guns, right? Now, I don't necessarily want to say we need to have X number of guns off the streets because then they might do all kind of things to get X number of guns if you try to do quotas, right? But I do think that to some extent, I would hope the general situation that doesn't necessarily need to have defined limits, that will be hard to judge because it will be to some extent subjective, is the illegal guns in circulation, which is at least over 10,000, although it could be in the tens of thousands. But I hesitate to say that because I'm so far removed from that report and I haven't been able to look back at it. So 12,000 is what you say. I'll go with that. It could be worse, but maybe not. Regardless, dozens of guns probably ain't cutting it, right? We have, I believe, San Fernando in line. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
You know, caller from Diego Martin has a couple points there that you really need to take a look at. You see, the recruitment of officers and competency, I have an issue with that as well. I have never seen the police service or the prison service have a targeted recruitment that I know of, and I can tell you, I could basically say no, they have never had where they target people of a higher education level to bring them into the force. to boost the service. They have never had that. And two, there are a lot of functional illiterates inside of there. A lot of them. You see, one of the issues they haven't shown, when they put these advertisements out, you have young men and young women looking for a job. So they apply, and they go to the recruitment. However, it is not where you see people want to be a police officer. What people want is what these young people want. A lot of them want a salary.
A job.
They want a job. And that is, and somehow within the training, they are not turning them into these officers that you want in the service. And that is throughout the service, in the prison service as well. In the prison service, one of our biggest problems in the prison service is not numbers, it's not recruitment, it's corruption in the prison service. You have maximum security, you have the remand, you have Frederick Street, and you always have these issues with things in the prison, illegal things in the prison. You're having cell phones always in the prison. Some of these videos that leaked out of the prison, you see them inside, they having parties, they have KFC. How is this happening without a serious part of the people who are there to safeguard the institution and to not allow these things? They are the ones that are bringing these things in the prison, and that's the problem. Mm-hmm. The problem here is that, as I said, it's multi-pronged. But one of the issues is they are not. And you said something there. You said we have a lot of police officers with degrees, but it's not helping.
Yeah.
It's not helping.
Yeah.
A lot of people go and they do the degrees while they're inside there. A lot of them get educated inside the service. As you said, when you had 3 tertiary education, so a lot of them went and they got the degrees and the diplomas and that type of thing. However, how much has this impacted the positivity of the service? Because what we see happening in those services, all we see is complaints, and they're falling short on our yardstick. So something has to change, and I think they have to start with the recruitment of these young people. Because if it is that you have 5 as these courses, you have 5, you're going in there with 5 O levels, but you can't read properly, and that is a serious situation in the police service. Yeah. I had made reports already in our station, and when the officer gave me the receipt, I could not tell what was his name. I could not tell, and I asked him, and he played coy, and I had to actually go back after his shift to ask another officer so I could have written it down properly that I could understand it. And that is some of the problems that they're having. And it multiplies. It multiplies. The other thing is, one of the things that we have is how a lot of corruption that we're hearing inside the police service and the prison service. It is learned behavior. I would say that it is learned behavior. And as I previously said, not enough of the good, or what we could perceive as the good officers, whistleblowing or calling out their batches, because this same blue wall that we talk about still exists inside there, unfortunately. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. I mean, yeah, I've seen some of the officers. Here's the thing. It's making me think. I've literally had this thought as you were speaking. We had Gate, right? Before Gate, it was dollar for dollar. So that was a political thing. Oh, you want dollar for dollar? I'll trump it with Gate. Regardless, and this is where I may have mentioned this publicly once about a couple months ago, because there are 2 areas where, to fix the country, where I would start, that I think, I'm not saying I know for sure. One of the things is just to reform how the public sector institutions are managed from an HR level, right? That includes national security services like police, prisons, Coast Guard, Defense Force. Obviously, you would hope that those things would have a whole different way of operating to the rest of the public sector, like ministries and utility companies, etc., etc. But some of the HR deficiencies, I think, they're not too dissimilar. Because, as we said, it's a job. It's not a vocation. It's just a job. Just like how getting work at whatever ministry or at WASA or at TNTech or at TSCT, it's a job. You do it. You want it for a job. You want to be a member of the regiment because you want a job. You want to be a police officer because you want a job. Not because you want to be a police officer. Not because you want to be a member of the Coast Guard, to go on a boat, to go out to sea because you want to either protect the country or you like to go out to sea. You want a job. So when it's time to go out to sea, you don't want to go out to sea. When it's time to go in the bush in the defense force, you don't want to go in the bush. The thing is, the other thing that I would focus on is the education system, particularly the primary education system. Because I feel when you have these police officers that get into UTT, UE, COSTAT, and they don't really sound all that skilled in terms of speaking, presenting, formulating arguments, reasoning, logic, to answer questions, to participate in class. To some extent, you have to ask yourself, what was their secondary and primary education like to get them to this level? And I feel as though that's where we're falling short. And it compounds itself as they go up. The deficiencies compound themselves, and we get what we get. So to some extent, GATE may have been a premature program. It's not just that we didn't necessarily think what we're going to do with all these graduates, but the fact that we really took it for granted that people would have been ready, because you could still qualify for the paper. As we know, this is a general thing that's said. Just because you have the paper doesn't mean that you really are competent and qualified. We have two callers on the line, Mova and Dabity, I believe. Dabity first. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Morning, Sean, and Happy New Year and morning to my good friend in San Fernando.
Morning.
Sean, you all are on the money, and from time to time it comes like a recurring decimal where we know all the problems. Sean, I am an educator. I'm a former police officer. I spent over 15 years at COSTAT. I elected to the Management for Protective Services. Everything you all are saying is correct. There is a module with respect to the academy, and I wouldn't call it an academy because it doesn't have the characteristics, all the different curricula and everything are absent. So you go back to, well, I could list to you all the problems. One of the most important modules that was taken out of the training was customer service. How on earth can you have, I don't even want to get into that. I want to go back to what San Fernando was saying last year. Let's find some means of assisting now. Because we would list problems from now until never ready, and we would not be helping the system.
Well, is that...
Because from time to time, I come on your program, ASP Ashraf is there, and I mention one or two simple management 101 things that the police is doing wrong. And he always has some excuse. The commissioner of police needs to be watching this program on morning. We need to be able to do something to help this situation, because you will have this program in the next 5 years, and it's the same problems you will have going down the road. Anyhow, have a nice day. And my friend from San Fernando, you come and you were able to outline so many problems again. Come with the solutions, and I know that you are competent enough and you have the capacity to bring solutions to the table. Sean, I must say with all respect that the audience that you have that follow this program are brilliant people, experienced people. Try to figure some way out that we can at least send a memo to her. Send a little correspondence saying, well, you know, the callers and then say, well, if you try A, B, C, or D.
Yeah.
Because everything else tried, failed.
All right, caller, we have another caller waiting, so I'll have to ask you to end there. But I did start with what I thought to be the starting point for solutions, but I could see where you're not going to see it that way because it wasn't specific to the police service. But before I get into that, we have Mova, I believe, on the line. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Morning, Sean.
Morning.
You know, I listened to a couple of other callers, and one of the things that struck me was the fact that, okay, a lot of police officers would have furthered their studies, and probably a lot of them have degrees and stuff like that. But, Sean, it's obvious to me that the police officers, those in the service who are highly educated, I don't think that they have any, how to put it, any clout to change anything. Because the problem is those who are on top there, right? Because of that, every time I call, I tell you the same thing. All the problems that we are facing today did not start last year, didn't start 10 years ago, didn't start under the last government. All those things started, and I can't, it's hard for me to hear people speaking their beliefs. And no one seems, I don't think we put in enough emphasis on the fact that our problems started since in the 1960s. And the thing is, and again, this is not a political statement I'm saying. The problem started under a certain administration who, up to today, Sean, is doing things the same way. And everybody talking and talking and talking, but the administration now, that same administration before under money, there are little things that might be different, but it's the same way, and our institutions have been damaged by these people, and our institutions are not going to be repaired by these people because they are the ones who created this whole situation. You're talking about corruption in the police service, in the prison. When did it start? And if when it started, it wasn't addressed immediately, do you think the same person who, people, the same administrators, the same people with the same thinking, who allowed it to get that way, is going to change it? They're going to find a solution? Why are we not waking up to that? I'm hearing people now praising the Prime Minister and saying he did a good thing because he put... This is the same Prime Minister who the last 10 years not listened to anybody. This is the same Prime Minister who foisted Ola, who is probably one of the worst police commissioners in the history of Trinidad and Tobago on us. So where are we going? We have to seriously change from the roots, but we're not doing that. Have a good day.
Thank you, caller. I mean, look, there's a couple of things. I honestly believe that the politicians of TNT, they don't necessarily know how to do things technically different. When I say technically, how to run agriculture, how to run a police service, how to do tourism, how to do whatever. They have a certain amount of institutional knowledge with the energy sector because history, right? But to some extent, everything else kind of got left by the wayside. One of those things is HR practices, because the population kept telling the governments, whichever government it is, because some of this thing we saw in the partnership and the UNC as well. We want jobs, we want money, we want freeness, right? So the police service, the prison service, the Coast Guard, the Defense Force, they were all kind of turned into just another government entity that offered jobs. And politicians are not incentivized to do anything to clean up these situations because it would mean firing people. Now, with regards to the police service and other national security services, you wouldn't necessarily restructure like how you might do what happened with Petrotrin, what might need to happen with WASA. But at the end of the day, they're not incentivized by the voting public to try to change or to learn how to change or to learn how to do better. And the institutional knowledge that is passed down of what they know of what to do, the reason why it's the same thing is that they just copy what other people are doing. The legislative agenda is almost the same. Like, we don't select people on their ability to innovate, on their ability to really critically think, right? Our education system and the way how our management and HR structure is, it is a do what I tell you to do. So then now, half the time when people get up to high office, they don't know how to be in charge. They just know that they want the salary, they want the title. Like, listen, to some extent, I don't think Ella Christopher was prepared to be Commissioner of Police. And there are many instances in life, sports, business, where it is going to be very hard for you to be actually prepared without a really good mentor for highest level management positions, right? It's going to be very hard unless you are just naturally inclined to that industry or you're incredibly intelligent. Not everybody's going to be a genius, right? So it is what it is. Part of it is the voters, part of it is the laziness of our political environment. That just, people don't want to step up. People don't want to try harder. One of the things about our political environment, people who do try, they tend to be the nail that sticks up that gets hammered back down because somebody else in politics is going to say, in their side, in their party is going to say, so-and-so make him look bad, tell him to stop it. He doing too much, he trying too hard. And that is also something I think that goes on in the public sector. If you work too hard and you achieve results, all of a sudden people are going to expect that level of production. And not everybody wants to work at that level of production. So it's easier for them to say, hey, you try too hard. What you think we're here for? You think we're here to change the world? No, we're here to collect a check. How many members of parliament also have that similar mindset to some of the people who go up for police jobs because they're just there to collect a check? Now, the thing is, back to Dabity, before we close off, we're way over time, but I do need to say this. I'm not sure if the police could solve some of the education system deficiencies, and I do think it starts with primary level. I do think it starts with the primary level, right? I don't necessarily know how to fix the education system. It could take a lot more aggressive spending to get better teachers, to get more good teachers. That's why I said hand in hand. You have to clean up the HR situation of the government overall because you need to find money at a time when we don't have money readily available. We can't cut a lot of things anymore. But what we can do is if we were more efficient with our spending and then whatever we save by being more efficient and by what we could cut for efficiency. So I'm not saying cut grants or programs. I'm saying we probably don't need all these employees on the payroll in order to get the job done. And we need to be more responsible. So yes, it might be harsh, but why are we going to cry over people losing their jobs when they're not producing for their salary? And they're supposed to be producing for the benefit of the country if they have a public job. So if they're cut, those that are not producing, those that are redundant, those that are worthless, they're cut. That money could then be used to be more targeted in the education system, which I think needs to start from the primary level. Now, with regards to the police service, Dabity, the implied point that you're making is we need something for the police service now. And perhaps the long and short, we don't have much time to get into it, but the long and short of what my brain is telling me to come up with is the police service needs more resources and it needs some of it to be spent in a targeted manner with regards to the police academy. Because what I feel happened was people didn't want the customer service course. Maybe some in senior management didn't think they needed the customer service course. And they figured, well, we'll save some bucks. That tends to be what happens in a government bureaucracy. We don't really need this, right? Do we really need this? No, let's cut it. And it's because the person making decisions doesn't really understand the implications of what you lose. You take it for granted. That's a very common error in management. And why are we already think that the management of some of these institutions are not so hot with regards to national security. Why should it be anything less? One of the things, ironically, is joint training academies or joint training courses, maybe not academies, because requirements of police and Coast Guard are going to be different. Police don't need to know how to be a ship crewman, right? Police don't necessarily need to do the things the Army does and vice versa. But certain things potentially could be joint because our national security ministry is not that big to say that we should have all of these kind of rivalries on which arm of service hates which arm of service. That could be one area where maybe, but joint things tend to also, you get enamored with the savings and then you get one-size-fits-all situations that don't always work. But probably more money into police training. But also, one of the things that I thought about, I can't remember when I thought about this was, I do think police recruiters need to go into schools. One of the reasons why I had to fix schools is the students need to have a better education. We are smart people. I just think that not everybody is exposed to the right level of education, and their horizons are too narrow. But assuming that to some extent the education level is sufficient enough or can be fixed to be sufficient enough, I think police recruiters should be part of, first of all, we need better guidance counseling in our schools to begin with. But then part of that should be police, fire, Coast Guard, Defense Force. I did have a Coast Guard guy come to my school once, I can't remember exactly why, to give a talk, so that these guys could interact with these students and say, this is what we need from you because we want the best. And are you willing, because some people are willing to rise to the challenge, to rise to the occasion, to have a sense of duty. Right now, however, I do think those jobs are seen as bottom of the barrel jobs in our society. I really do. And why I say that is, and I'm not saying that you're going to get someone from every geographical corner of the country to sign up for those jobs. But think about it. There's a lack of diversity, socioeconomic, cultural, etc., racial, in those jobs. Think about it, right? Why? I don't think those jobs are viewed as anything more than just a low-level job. A lot needs to change with regards to how our society views things. That's why I started at the macro. I think, Darby, you wanted more micro solutions. And I think in this case, you need both because you need some immediate to deal with the immediate crime problem. You do. So I have to concede that point. So it all depends now. Lord only knows if we will get change on that level. But can't go into any more details because we're out of time. Thanks to all the calls for joining me. Despite, yes, I know the good lady, she will be with me next week. So if you are hoping to hear a commentary on all that has happened in the last week and a half to 2 weeks, you will get it next week. Have no fear. Meanwhile, make today as good a day as you can. As Mr. Shah would always say, remember your allegiance to the Republic first. That is what we should be asking of everybody around us, of ourselves, of our politicians. It's nice to be nice. Stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring